All right. So, hi everyone. Welcome to Acceleration Circle weekly meetings. This is Acceleration Circle Book Club. We're discussing Psychology of Money, written by Morgan Housel. Welcome everyone. What I'd like to do is take a bit of time and introduce our newest members to the community. And then we'll go ahead and jump into the chapter 6 of the book of Psychology of Money. So I think Tammy is the only one that's new. But Margarita and Aram can also just introduce themselves. But Tammy, why don't I let you introduce yourself real quick, and then we'll get started.
Hi, my name is Tammy Demirza, and I live in Greenville, South Carolina. And I met you because of LinkedIn, I think. And I'm awfully glad to be here. I don't have the book. I didn't even know what the title of the book was. So I'm going to listen in.
Okay, very good. Excellent. Okay, so let's jump in straight into the book. So we are discussing Psychology of Money, written by Morgan Housel, and we are on chapter 6. If you don't have the book, then you can DM me separately, and I'll make sure you have a copy of the book, or at least you have access to the book so you can read the chapters. And basically, it's like the book is all about as we discussed last time, Tammy, it's all about psychology behind how people make decisions about their money, right? So we're discussing the concept of money, the concept of our relationship with money, how and where that comes from, and if we're not happy with the relationship that we have with money, how do we change that? And the book club is very good because it allows us to read one chapter per week, and then we have a chance to discuss it, and then we move on to having we elaborate on the topics, we come up with examples, we figure out how we can utilize it in our everyday lives. But since you haven't read it, I'll just do a quick summary of what we had talked about from chapters 1 through 4. In fact, what I can do, because I have a summary of that, so why don't I try to do that, because I could get a summary. Let's see where that is. That should be this one here, I think. Okay. All right. So yes, I have the summary. So in chapter 1, if you guys remember, plus it will be very good review for everybody else. So in chapter 1, we talked about, and the book discussed about the fact that people are not crazy when it comes to money. It may look like we're crazy because something that is important to me, or something that I do with regards to how I deal with my finances or how I make my own decisions when it comes to money, may sound crazy to you, but it's probably quite normal to me. So the book was discussing how people make different financial decisions, and it has a lot to do with your upbringing, with your childhood, with your emotions, with your logic, with the even adult experiences that you had with money. And if you recall, we jumped into a lot of my own stories of how what had happened for me as a financial consultant, and what I had seen happen to clients as a financial consultant. So, and but then we talked about, if you guys remember, we talked about Bill Gates's and Kent Evans' example. Uh, and basically, we talked about the fact that when it comes to uh, wealth, and when it comes to not just wealth, anything in life, whether it's success, wealth, whether it's happiness, but specifically when it comes to investing in wealth, there are sort of two oppositions that you have to think about, and those are luck and risk. And if you guys remember, in chapter 1, we really talked about the importance of luck and risk when it comes to making those financial decisions, decision making. And oftentimes, if you recall, we talked about the fact that people do not recognize the importance of luck when it comes to investing. And again, we brought in the example of Bill Gates and Kent Evans. And if you recall, when Bill Gates was just starting out, even when he was a child in, I think he was in, I think I forget which city he was in, but when he was in high school, there was another friend that was part of their group. That friend's name was Kent Evans, and in Bill Gates' own accounts, by Bill Gates' own accounts, he recalls that his friend Kent Evans was just as smart, if not smarter, than he and his other partner, Paul Allen. And the three of them were together, you know, brainstorming about, setting up setting up Microsoft and working together and starting a business together. But if you guys recall what happened, Kent Evans had unfortunately, he had a accident, right? I think it was a skiing accident, and he passed away. He died when he was very young. So in his case, risk was on his side, as opposed to in Bill Gates's case, luck was on his side. How was luck on his side? Of course, Bill Gates was very smart, and of course, there was a lot of his own ingenuity that helped him set up Microsoft. But also, if you recall, we talked about the fact that he happened to be going to the only high school at the time who had access to mainframe computers at the time, right? If you recall in the book, it talks about the fact that Bill Gates's mom was a part of the PTA, and they took the money from the PTA and they basically purchased a computer that was able to, the children had access to. And because of that, that was the luck portion of, Bill Gates' journey, because he had access to, at a very young age, to technology that even college students didn't have access to. So again, the concept of luck and risk is very, very important, and that's the example that he brought in chapter 1. So I'll stop here for chapter 1 and see if there's any questions, any comments about chapter 1 before we move on to chapter 2. Anyone? Any questions? Did I recall everything? Did I miss anything? No. Okay, so we're going to go to chapter 2. Again, chapter 2, he expanded on the idea of luck and risk. And now we talked about Warren Buffett, and also Warren Buffett's mentor, who was Benjamin Graham. And if you go read the book, I don't want to give you all of the details, so you can actually read the book. But again, they expanded on the idea of, how luck and risk play a lot of role. And also, oftentimes, people assume when they do well in investing or even in business in general, they assume it's mostly because of their, genius, right? Ingenuity. But there is oftentimes there's a lot of luck involved. Being at the right place at the right time, meeting the right people, saying the right things, being in the right environment is very, very important. So we talked about that. And then, if you guys recall, chapter 3 was about, remember, it said never enough, right? He talked about, do you guys remember the example he brought in of Rajat Gupta and Bernie Madoff's examples? And if you remember, there was an incident when somebody said, oh, Rajat Gupta had, there was the comparison between a private equity manager had made millions more dollars than another guy who was a recognized author. And you guys remember what the author said? Do you remember his response? What was his response? Who can tell me what was the point of chapter 3? Because I think this is a very important point. Who can tell me what was the point of chapter 3?
I
You
know.
guys, go
Hello,
ahead.
everyone.
Hi, Armin and John. Tell us about the very, very important point that we discussed in chapter 3. We're just reviewing
If
everything, by the
I'm
way.
not mistaken, it was about I know how much is enough.
Exactly. So he said, I don't remember the names, but there was a private equity manager who had made, I don't know, $100 million or whatever. and then they were all at an event, some high level event, and then somebody says to the author, says, oh, you know, what you made in 1 year, this guy made in 1 month, right? And then the author says, yes, but he'll never have what I have. And they said, what? And he said, knowing that's enough. Because when is it enough, right? How many houses can one possibly have? How many boats can one possibly have? How many, I don't know, you tell me, diamond rings can one possibly have? In fact, yesterday, I don't even know why, I was scrolling YouTube. I came across Putin. It's all about now, it's Putin, Trump, and Zelensky, right? So I came across, there was a YouTube video about Putin, and they were saying about Putin's wealth and how wealthy he was, like unimaginably, imaginably wealthy, like wealthy beyond belief. And apparently he has like something like 6 or 7 yachts. Like he's got like so many yachts. And then he got another yacht as a present from some other oligarch, billionaire, Russian billionaire. And so my mother and I are sitting there. I was like, how many yachts can one person have, or even have the chance to use, right? So the idea of knowing when it's enough and not comparing yourself to other people. The worst thing we can do is compare ourselves to other people, when it comes to our success, whether it comes to our money, whether it comes to anything else. You know, I tell my daughter, there's always somebody who's going to be prettier than you are, taller than you are, smarter than you are, younger than you are, whatever else than you are. Who cares? Be happy with what you have and just compare yourself to yourself. The most important thing you can do is compare yourself to yourself and put yourself, your personal goal, to be better as your own human being. Be better than yourself, not other people. So that was the point of chapter 3. He talks about never enough. And then there were many, many other examples. I'm not going to get into that. Same thing with Bernie Madoff. We talked about Bernie Madoff. Bernie Madoff was a legitimate business owner. He was a very savvy investor. He was a smart guy. He had a legitimate business, and he could have just, if he had just been happy enough and satisfied enough with what we had, he was already a very successful and very wealthy person. He didn't have to go and scam people to make even more billions of dollars and even more money. But sometimes it's the ego. People just have this ego thing, because when you have, you know, 1 million, you want 10 million. When you have 10 million, you want 100 million. When you have 100 million, you want a billion. You have a billion, you want trillion. Enough. When is it enough, right? So, and again, that ties into the concept of happiness and so on and so forth. And if you guys remember, the other example was about Rajat Gupta, who was also a very interesting example, because he came from poverty, from India, and he built his career and his success completely on his own merit, his own, ability, his own fact that he was extremely smart, hardworking, and he achieved a lot of success and financial success. But then what happened? He went ahead, he was so greedy, he was on a board of directors of Goldman Sachs. Then he found out that Warren Buffett was going to put in a bunch of money into Goldman Sachs to really bail out Goldman Sachs from financial ruin in 2008, when the market was in crisis. What does he do? He took the information, which happens to be an insider information. He took this information and he used it to his advantage, and he went ahead and bought, I don't know, let's say, I don't know, 100,000 shares of Goldman Sachs. He made a quick $1 million, but he was already worth, let's say, 100 million. 1 million wasn't going to make a difference for him. Why would you do that? Guess what happened? The United States government, SEC, FINRA got a hold of it. They went ahead and, not only they put him in jail and they put his broker in jail, but he lost the most important thing in this world, his reputation. Why? Because it wasn't enough. So this point that Morgan Housel is making in this book in chapter 3 is, I think, paramount. It's really, really important. That danger of greed is very real, and we got to. First thing is, we want to recognize it and then combat it. Any questions, comments about what I discussed so far? No? Okay. Now going to chapter 4, confounding compounding. We talked about compounding is the most powerful force in investing. Who can remember what is compounding? Who wants to tackle that? I know Armine knows about compounding, but who else can tell me what is compounding? You don't have to show your face if you don't want to, but maybe Aram can tell us, or Mohammed can tell us, or Tammy can tell us. Who wants to take this one? Let's explain compound, because today we're just doing a quick review because we have a couple of new people that are joining and who haven't been with the book club. So I just want to do a quick review of what we've discussed so far. Tammy, do you know what is compounding? Compound
No.
interest.
No, I mean, I know that over time it multiplies. That's all I know.
Exactly, but that's the best, simplest explanation. Albert Einstein called it the sixth wonder of the world. Last time I showed all kinds of charts and things like that, and graphically, what I wanted visually to see, which I'll send you, if you're interested, I'll send you a separate copy of that. It was the visual of how compound interest works, because basically your money is working, not only it's your initial investment, but it's the interest earned on your investment. So not only the difference between compound interest and simple interest is that whatever money you invest in with simple interest, only the initial investment is earning that same, let's say 5%. You put in $100, you're earning 5%. Simple interest means this year you earned 5%, let's say $5, right? Second year, another 5%, another $5. Third year, another $5. So what happens? 5 plus 5 plus 5 plus that. So every year you're earning $5 on your $100 investment. Compound interest is different because your interest that you earn gets basically it's added to your initial investment. And now, first year, you save $100. At 5%, you earn $5. Second year, it's not just $100. Now it's $105. So you're $105 earning 5%. So it's, let's say, $5.05, or it's a bit more than $5. So first year you're earning 5%, second year earning, let's say, $5.10. Third year you're earning $5.20, 30 cents. But and it starts out initially very slow and gradual. But then after 7, 8, 9 years, it exponentially jumps up, really jumps up. And that's why in the book, in that chapter, what he talks about and what the book talks about is the importance of time and compounding. And why is time important? It's because of compounding. So time is way more important than picking the right stocks. Like people go crazy, and money managers spend millions, if not multi-millions of dollars doing research to try to figure out which stock they should buy, when they should buy, when they should sell. In the meantime, 90% of the returns come from being in the right sector and just giving it time for your investment to work out. It's not in and out of the market, it's time in the market. So that was what he was discussing in that chapter. Let me see what else he was discussing in that chapter. Let's see. So time matters more than the returns. We talked about that. And then we talked about Warren Buffett's wealth. We talked about the fact that one of the reasons why he is considered the best investor, but also one of the wealthiest investors, he made his fortune by investing, is because of time. Because number one, he started out very, very young in life. He started out when he was 10 years old to do professional investing, or obviously he was not an adult, but he was doing investing, he was doing research and investing money. He started out very young, but also, he crossed $1 billion. Like he was most of 80% of his wealth, he's worth over $90 billion. Most of that money he earned, and his wealth grew after he turned 50, and then after he turned 65. Again, that's the same exponential graph that I want to visually show you, because he had a lot of patience. He started out early and he had time on his side, right? And then we also talked about, I think that it is going to be another option when I'll talk about his. Do you guys recall there was another partner between, so the Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett duo had another partner. Who can remind me, who can tell me who was the third partner and what happened to him? And for those of you who are following me on Instagram or LinkedIn, I post these stories. I post these stories on my LinkedIn and Instagram pages. So you should be following me if you're not. But who can tell me who was Warren Buffett's third partner and what happened to him? Him, yes, him. Anyone? Mohammed.
I don't remember any name, Anajan, but I can tell
His
the
name was
story.
Nick. His name was Nick Guerin. Nick Guerin. But tell me the story. What happened?
He was impatient and he borrowed a lot of money, and he sell his part of stock to the Buffett, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. So what happened
It's
is
very low price.
he was definitely impatient. He was looking for shortcuts. So rather than Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett, they were buying stocks and they were being very patient with their investments, as opposed to their friend Nick, who was not only buying stocks, but he wanted to make money faster. So what he did is he took advantage of the concept called borrowing on margin. Remember, we talked about that. Borrowing on margin, when in your brokerage account and your investment account, you borrow money from the institution, from the bank or the financial institution. And then instead of, let's say, if you only have $10,000, you can buy, let's say, 100 shares of a stock. But now if you borrow money, now you have 15,000. Now you can borrow, instead of 100 shares, now you can buy 150 shares of the stock. And if that stock goes up, you're making money, even if you're paying interest on your borrowed money. So even if you're paying 5% interest, but you made 10% return, obviously you're in a black, right? You're in a green, you made money. That concept works very well when markets go up, and that concept works terribly when the markets go down. So again, in this case, what happened is Nick Guerin was in a hurry. He leveraged his investments. He borrowed on margin, and things went against him, and he was forced to sell his investments. And even though, again, according to Warren Buffett, Nick was just as smart and just as capable of an investor, but he was forced to sell everything. And as a result, what happened, right? He's not known. Nobody knows about him. He's not, considered one of the best investors in the world, versus Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger are. So that was the point of that chapter that we discussed. Let me go see what else we discussed in that chapter. Growth doesn't
Don't
have to be.
underestimate small changes.
That's right. We also talked about interrupting compounding is costly. I talked about the fact that, again, if you guys are interested, we're going to go deeper. We will dive deeper into specific investment scenarios. And I can show you some statistics when, if you missed out the top 5 performing days in the market, that will cut down on your investment return by maybe 40%. So basically the point is, don't try to time the market. Don't go in and out of the market trying to time the market. A lot of people try to do that, and it's difficult. It is extremely difficult to time the market. And that was his point as well in the book. Interrupting compounding is costly, and to try to time the market can be costly. And the power of endurance, simply saying that the market, just staying in the market and allowing time to do its work, is one of the most important advantages that one can have. So that was for chapter, let's see, what chapter was that? I think that was chapter
4.
That was
4.
chapter 4, correct. And chapter 5, I'm sure you guys discussed it last week. Who wants to jump on and tell me what you guys remember from chapter 5, and then we'll go to chapter 6. Who remembers chapter 5?
The chapter is all about the difference between getting rich and staying rich.
Tell me what's
And
the difference between getting
yeah,
rich and
author
staying rich?
makes it clear making money requires risk, optimism, and but keeping money requires humility and sometimes even paranoia. The story starts with I don't remember the name again. One of the greatest stock traders of that period. It was early 90s.
Uh-huh.
And during the market crash, while many investors were ruined, he made a fortune. So he became a millionaire. Meanwhile,
So what are the the differences in like what kind of abilities and skills you need to possess? Because they're very different skills when it comes to growing wealth versus holding on to your wealth versus maintaining your wealth. What are the different skills?
You need to know opposite minds. You need to have opposite mindsets. You need to take risk to make money, and then you need to stop taking risk to keep money.
Okay. Does anyone agree or disagree with Armina's point? Do you agree what she's saying? Do you agree with what she's saying? So basically what Armina is saying is that, there are two very distinct skills that we need to think about when it comes to making the money and growing your money versus keeping your money, maintaining your wealth, not losing your wealth. And basically, they're in a way almost like opposite of each other because you have to take risks, calculated risks, obviously, but you have to take some risks. And again, if you recall, whenever I talk about investing, and I always say, when you utter the word investing, or you think of investing in general, you have to understand all investing involves risk. There is no such thing. When you say I'm investing my money, that means you're taking risk. There is no such thing as investing without risk unless there are some platforms, there are some products, and we can get into that. We can go into that. We can explain what they are. They're very popular in the United States. In some other countries, they may not have it, but we can certainly learn about them because I think the world is changing, the globe is getting smaller, and I think a lot of these platforms are sort of arriving to, other parts of the world as well. But typically, when you talk about investing, it involves risk unless you have an investment platform or a product that has some guarantees, and the guarantees come in a form of basically insurance. So for example, you have bonds. Let's say you're investing your money in bonds. Some bonds are insured and some bonds are not insured. So the bonds that are insured, obviously they are protected and they're guaranteed. Basically, that means you cannot lose your money, but you pay for it. There is a price that you pay for that insurance. The same thing with investing in the stock market. There are platforms such as annuities, or there are other platforms such as structured CDs or structured notes or bank CDs where they have guarantees. They have FDIC insurance, or they have other types of insurance where your money is invested, but it is protected and guaranteed. And usually they're very clearly stated in your investment plan or in your investment document. But generally speaking, most investments come with risk. And even those investments that have guarantees and protection, typically the risk in there is the fact that you have to hold on to this investment for a period of time. So I guess it also has a risk because in structured CDs or regular CDs or structured notes or any of those, even when you're buying a bond, if you're buying a 1-year bond or a 5-year bond or a 10-year bond, in order for you to really, that you have to keep your investment for the period of time that you intended to keep the investment. Same with the CDs. If you break your CD, then you don't get the interest and so on and so forth. So it's very, very important that we understand the concept of investing involves risk, always, always, always.
Najan, may I ask you, this applies also on real estate investments, right?
Absolutely, yes. That's a good point. Thank you so much. I love you. You're the best. Don't ever miss our meetings, because what would we do without our arm in it? Okay, because okay, so Tammy has to go. Bye, Tammy. So here's the thing about real estate. Again, if you are talking about real estate, it's still an investment. It's a different kind of an investment, but there's still risks involved, because typically speaking, people think that if you buy a house, usually the house prices go up, and usually you buy something for $100,000, and then especially if your grandparents bought something, at least in the US, I'll talk about the US statistics. Uh, you know, let's say if my grandparents bought something in the 40s, they could have bought a house. For example, okay, one of the houses that I bought, when we bought it from the original owner, there was like an old couple. They were in their 80s, and we got the initial document that they had purchased the house, because it came with the floor plan and everything else. They had paid $7,500 for that house in the 40s, I think, in the 40s, 1940s. Same house we bought in, let's say, in God knows, hold on, let me think, maybe 2000, let's say, give or take, around 2000, 1999 maybe. So 2000, so 60 years later. Well, guess, what do you think? Who can guess from 1940s that, middle class couple bought something in New York, in the suburbs of New York, in an area called Queens. They bought a house for $7,500. How much do you think that house would have been worth, obviously including inflation, would have been worth approximately 60 years later? Can anybody take a big guess?
If consider inflation, average inflation rate, it's 3% per year.
Yes. 3 to 4%. Yes, you're right.
It is.
Take a wild guess. Who wants to take a wild guess? An old couple that we bought the house from, how much did they sell it to us? How much did I pay for that house that they paid $7,000 for in 1945, I think it was? Anybody wants to take a guess?
Maybe 3 times, maybe 200,000, 300,000.
Okay.
No, million?
So the price was $400,000. We paid $400,000 for the same house that was purchased by this old couple.
But it
I'm
was
sure
much
they
more
were
than
young.
inflation.
Oh yeah, well, it's inflation plus growth, right? It's growth and inflation. But and people, when they hear this, what was my point? Why am I bringing up this example? My point was that people, when they look at it, like, oh my God, you put $7,000, and then, well, whatever, X times years later, 60 years later, 50 years later, you could sell it for 400,000. Oh my God, that's the best investment ever. But do you recall when we did the exercise, when we compared real estate investment growth versus stock market growth? Do you remember the difference?
Yes,
Because
it
the
was
point
really
is,
low.
the
It was
point
like
is,
a
on
4 or
average,
5.
yes, the point is that on average, real estate investments, at least in the United States, grew on average, let's say, between 4 and 5%. 4 and 5%. That's what the average growth rate of real estate investment is in the United States. If you bought a house and you sat on it and you kept it and you waited and you sold it, your average return would have been 4 to 5% or 4 to 6%. Do you remember what's the average return in the market, in the stock market?
In the stock market, if it is like indexes, it's
investments in the stock
10,
market.
11,
10, 11%. So my point is the same investment that let's say this couple did for $7,500. If they didn't buy that house and they took their same $7,500 and put it in the S&P 500 index or QQQ index or Russell 2000 index or Russell 3000 index. There's a lot of different, anyways, they put it in the stock market. They would have had, instead of 400,000 when they sold the house to us, they probably would have had well over $1 million. So people fail to see that, because what happens is, because the stock market is liquid, people go in and out, they buy things, it's much more accessible. It's not easy to sell a house. It takes time and effort to sell a house. You have to clean it up, you have to hire a real estate agent, you have to, pay a huge commission to the real estate agent to sell a house. It's not liquid. So because it's not liquid, it's not easy to sell. So people see it, they're like, oh my, and typically people tend to hold on to their houses for much longer period of time than they hold on to their stock market investments. And that's why most of the time people don't compare, because the point I'm trying to make is that if you take same exact investment, but instead of putting in a real estate investment, instead of a property, you put it in the market, it would have grown much more. Now, there are many, many, many nuances that I'm not going to get into it today. For example, in a stock market, you have capital gains, depending on what kind of investment you do. If it's just one stock, when you buy and sell, there's a tax that you have to pay. If it's a mutual fund investment, there is dividend taxes every year that you have to think about. So there's some nuances that you have to be mindful of. But the same with real estate as well. If you bought real estate for $10,000 and you sold it for $400,000, you have to pay capital gains tax. But there's a lot of tax rules. For example, if it was your primary home and you're a married couple in the United States, first 500,000 is not subject to capital gains tax, but you have to prove that you lived in the house for at least 2 out of 5 years. Anyways, there's a lot of rules, a lot of things to know and to think about. And that's why you need a good accountant to reduce your taxes. And that's what we come in. I do that. I help my clients with making sure that they're taking advantage of all the legal rules and regulations available to them, depending on their jurisdiction, to take advantage of those tax rules and regulations. But anyways, what was my point? My point is that time and compounding effect is extremely important. And it was a very good list for me. I remember I was like, wow, they did a really good investment. But then if you compare to equities always work out better as long as you have patience and as long as you don't go in and out of the market and try to be like a genius and try to be smarter than everybody else and try to time the market. Do not time the market is my point. So that was the point of that chapter. Let me see if there's anything else.
5? It was 5.
Yeah, that was 5. I think so. And let's talk about chapter 6. And how much time do we have? Of course, it's 12:40 already. We don't have a lot of time, but that's okay. Let's talk about chapter 6. Let me see what we have for chapter 6. Did anybody read chapter 6? My students.
Yes, I did.
Tails, you win. This is a good one. Tails, you win. Armine, explain to us, what did you take away
Yes,
from chapter
I
6?
liked this part, as it is resonated with me, as he is speaking about failure, and that failure is part of the process.
So tail, just so everybody knows, tail is like poch, right? It's your tail. That's what he means. Does everybody understand what he means by saying tail? He's talking about phenomenon that is so far out there that most people don't even think that there is this possibility could exist. But these things exist because oftentimes people look at past performance and a lot of the financial models and investment models take into account what has happened in the past, what we already know, what we already have as facts. But his point when he talks about tails is the fact that sometimes, and they also call it black swan, I think, there's these events that happen that nobody could have predicted. For example, COVID. Nobody would have predicted that COVID would happen, and COVID had a huge impact on the market, right? So that's what he's talking about. So I just want to make sure everybody understand what tails means. Go ahead, Armine.
Yeah, and he's talking about success, that success isn't about winning all the time. but about the few big wins that make up for everything else. And he brings examples of Walt Disney, who lost money on hundreds of cartoons before, but the one cartoon, it was a Snow
White
Snow White, yeah,
and the
changed
Seven
everything.
Dwarfs.
Yeah, changed everything. And he talks about venture capitalists, that most of their investment flop, but a small percent can bring $1 billion companies. So and other examples of one example of art dealer who
Yes.
didn't get rich by picking perfect pieces, but he just bought a ton of art, and a small percentage ended up being worth a fortune.
So let's
So
stop there for a second, because I think this is a really important point, because what he's saying in art or in investing in general, especially when you talk about private equity investments or angel investments, or investing in like startup companies, because there's a lot going on, especially in Armenia, about startup ecosystem and so on. And what I want people to understand is those are very risky investments, and the way you minimize your risk is by buying blocks of things, just like Armenia said, right? You're buying blocks of things, because what happens is, let's say in a startup company, you invest in if you invest in only one company or only three or only five companies, chances are 90% all those companies are going to fail. But if you invest in 1,000 startup companies, all you need is maybe out of 1,000, maybe two or three to make it. Out of 1,000 companies that you're investing, I'm talking about startup companies, like, because Google was a startup company at some point. Amazon was a startup company at some point. Nobody knew. You cannot predict. Nobody has the guarantee or a magic wand to know, okay, this company is going to make it. We could try, we can predict, we can be lucky, but no one can guarantee. So my point is, Google, Amazon, Walmart, all of those companies were Apple were startup companies at some point. But then what happens is, the one that makes it, the returns on that company is 20 times, 30 times, 40 times, 50 times over, 1,000% returns. So that one or two wins that you have make up the difference of all the 90% of the companies that fail, which is what's going to happen. 90% of them are going to fail, but that 1 or 2% that make it will make up the difference, and you will make so much more money that will overwhelm and cover the losses of all the other companies, because that one or two, if you were the one who were lucky enough to buy initially, shares in Apple or shares in Amazon or shares in Google, when they were like shares in, you name it, Meta, in Facebook, whatever, you name it, right? We would have been billionaires, right? We would have been multi-billionaire. In fact, I had a story about that. Do you guys recall the story that I talked about? Because I love this concept of threes, because each genius person, and then we do have our Founders Corner that I think next week Maria is going to start doing Founders Corner, which means we're going to be discussing one CEO or one founder at the time, and discuss about their life's journey and also their professional journey. But to me, it seems like most very successful CEOs and executives and founders usually didn't do it all by themselves. Usually they were in teams. Usually there was more than one person involved. Uh, in case of Microsoft, it was Paul Allen and Bill Gates. Apparently there was a third person who passed away, right? In case of Apple, it was Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, but there was also a third person. Even with Apple, there was a third partner. His name was Ronald Wayne. And I did a post about that, actually. Ronald Wayne, and I called it the $1 billion mistake. Because what happened is, Ronald Wayne sold his shares of, he was one of the co-founders. He was the third co-founder of Apple. In fact, it's public records. You can go Google it. And I posted it on my LinkedIn post. with the actual signatures of Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and Ronald Wayne signing over, and he basically sold his shares of Apple back to Steve Jobs because he was concerned that Steve Jobs was being too aggressive. He was taking too many loans from the banks, and he was doing things that maybe didn't feel comfortable for Ronald Wayne. Why? Because looking back, people can say, oh my God, he was so stupid. Why would you sell your shares for $800, right? But, obviously there's always an explanation, because the reality is Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak were very young. They were in their 20s. They could afford to take risks. This guy was in his 40s. He had already gone through a couple of failures. He had already started businesses that failed. He probably had family and mortgage and a house and expenses and children to care for. So he had different types of responsibilities. He couldn't take the risk the way Steve Jobs could. So there's always an explanation. But the point is, he sells his shares, and if you look at and calculate what those shares would be worth today, they would have been worth well over $90 billion. So $90 billion mistake, right? But then again, my point is, again, if you look at it and think about it, most successful people, most successful companies, anything in this world, in this life, does not happen overnight, and it doesn't happen because of one person's genius. Usually they have the ability to, tame their ego, work with other people, find a good partner who complements them. Even Elon Musk with Tesla. Did you guys know that Elon Musk with Tesla, I think his current ownership of Tesla is only 20%. He brought in other people who were very smart, who were able to help him build the company, scale the company, and so on. Same thing with other ones, right? Same thing with Google, same thing with Apple, same thing even with Facebook. Early on, he brought in a lot of very important people, and they were paid by shares of the company, and they all did very well, and they all became very, very wealthy. So that was the point of that chapter. Let's see what other points that we have in that chapter. Anyone else? Maria, what about you? What do you have to say about this last chapter?
So basically, what I really liked about the chapter, and it has a lot to do with the founders, right? So, and that we should not give up, and there is no one night success. So basically, as Armina said, in terms of Disney, right? So they produced, I don't know, 100 cartoons, and this one just skyrocketed and covered all the previous costs, right? So what I think, usually founders, I'm switching a little bit to founders corner,
Yes.
and it's interesting because they usually give up when they are very, very close to success, right? And if we are willing to do that extra step, we will be witnessing our success. So
And
that
that
was
brings up a very, very important point. There's a very famous video. If I find the video, we can watch it together next time. But there's a video about Olympic gold medalists, and it was one with swimming. And basically, it was showing that the difference between the gold medalist who took first place versus even the silver medalist who takes second place, right? There's
Mhm.
microseconds difference. It's not
Yeah.
even 1 second. It's smaller than a second.
Yes.
So that's the difference between getting all the recognition, getting all the money, getting all the accolades versus not. It's very, very, very small. So to Maria's point, oftentimes, unfortunately, we work so hard and then we're so close, but we give up. And I think that's the difference between the successful people, professionals, CEOs, founders, and so on. But the difference between recognizing failure as a normal part of this is also in the book. Recognizing failure as a normal part of operations and growing business, and you have to try out a lot of different things. There's no way. It's almost hardly ever you can say that somebody started something and right away they were successful.
Yeah.
What happens is when we see the success, we think it's an overnight success. but we don't realize there were years and years and years of trial and errors and building things and perfecting things and building teams and so on and so forth. We don't see that. We only see the so-called overnight success, but it's never an overnight success.
And the most important component here is the partner, right? As we mentioned, partnership, because this is the person who is kind of your accountability partner. And if not the partner, you probably will most likely will give up earlier, you know, because entrepreneurship is not the easy thing as it seems, because we usually tend to compare our point A to someone's point B, right? And we should understand that behind that there is a lot of work, a lot of sacrifice, and a lot of sleepless nights. And yeah, that's very important in my case, to have an amazing partner like you.
Thank you. And I am so happy and so lucky and fortunate to have an amazing partner like you. And hopefully, we'll be growing our partnership because we're looking for more partners. And I think we have some of our partners here. We've got Aram and Armine, who are partners for Acceleration Circle. And we're actually rebuilding the website pretty soon. When we publish the new website, you'll see all the list of partners that are working with us. And you're absolutely right. It's all about having the right partnerships. We only have about 6 minutes left to the hour. I was hoping we could do some other things, but I think that at this point we don't really have a lot of time. Let's take a vote. What do you guys want to do next week besides you discussing chapter 7? What else do you guys want to do? Mohammed, you can type in the messages. Aram, type in the messages. If there's anything specific that you guys want us to do, we can do. Besides discussing chapter 6 and me giving my examples, of course. Me with my examples. What else do you guys want to do next week?
Maybe we may ask in our group.
In our group, we can ask in a group. You're right. Okay, are there
But
any other
you know,
questions?
Annajan, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I want to add one thing that very important for me. It depends. It is about failure, and I want to say that in my culture, in our culture, there is also a strong belief that you must be perfect and never fail. And this creates a fear of failure, and as a result, a fear of trying anything new. I grew up in generation of perfectionists, and we were taught never to give up, but at the same time, we were also taught to not to take risk, and mistakes were seen as a failures, not as a path to success. But I see that things are changing, and I'm very happy about this. The young generation is more willing to take risk, and they don't want to fail, but they are not afraid to try. And
what about you, Armine? Do you feel like you, by recognizing this fact, how are you working it on yourself? How are you making sure that you are putting yourself in situations where you would be willing to take more risks and you're not looking failure as like the end all and be all thing?
it was a long work with psychologists.
Okay. Long journey. Go ahead. It's okay.
Long journey with psychologists, and now I'm open to try new things. Maybe not very risky because I'm in finance, but I want to try new things and I want to learn new things. And I know that if it is a room for failure, there is a room for success as well.
Amazing. Yes, I'm so happy you to say. First of all, thank you for sharing your journey with us and being open and honest about it. And I'll tell you from my own personal experience, I can tell you so many failures. Oh my goodness, I could write a book about that. Maria, we're going to write a book and we're going to put everybody else's failures in the book. Because let me tell you something, there is no such person. Listen, there's no such person, especially a successful person who hasn't experienced failure. And I think the difference, to Armine's point, the difference between a truly successful people and not so successful people is number one, you're not afraid of mistakes, and you'd be willing to take risks because you understand mistakes are part of it, right? And you look at mistakes as a stepping stone, as a chance to learn, not like, oh my God, it's the end of the world and that's it, I'm a failure, I'm embarrassed, oh my God, what people will think about me. That's another thing about certain cultures, by the way. People are so worried about what somebody else is going to think about them. Who the hell cares? Like, this is what I tell my students, some of my, especially Armenian students. I'm like, who cares what people think about you? Worry about what you think about yourself. Don't worry about what other people. You're going to live your life based on, especially most of the time, these are strangers. They're not even your friends. They're not even your family. Some strange person, some, I don't know, distant colleague or whoever is going to have an opinion, and you're worried about that person's opinion, and you base your entire actions based on other people's opinions. So you're right, there's a lot of work to be done. And yes, the newer generation is so much braver than we were when we were younger. But this is very important trait to work on, to understand that it takes risk. And every single, I mean, I can't even imagine, maybe this would be our homework for this weekend. Can we find a successful person, truly successful person, who has never experienced failure, or a major failure anyway? Let's see if we
I
can.
don't think we can find them.
Right. Because again, failure is part of success. Failure and success go hand in hand together. Because you try one thing, it doesn't work. You're like, okay, what can I do? And there's another thing. The attitude is so important. We talked about this. Attitude is so important with regards to everything, with regards to your self-satisfaction, happiness, building wealth, everything. Because when you work on something and okay, it doesn't work out, you fail, it didn't work, you started well, you took one path and it didn't work out, and some people will say, oh my God, I'm stupid, I am incompetent, I can never do anything, I can never accomplish anything, and they just give up, right? Other people, what do? This was interesting, this was a really good learning point, now I understand that this path doesn't work, but there's so many other paths that I need to try to figure out which path works, right? So your attitude, the way you take care of yourself, the way you are handling yourself, and like people, a lot of times people say, be kind to yourself, be forgiving to yourself, because we're all human beings. I made a lot of mistakes. If you guys are interested, I'll tell you all about my mistakes. I have so many. I mean, it would take 5 hours, maybe longer. But that's another talk for another time. We're exactly at 1 hour. So unless somebody else has any other questions, comments, I think we could stop here and continue on next week. Any questions or comments, guys? I guess not. In that case, I wish you all a wonderful weekend. Weekend's coming up. I like it. In America, we call it TGIF. What is TGIF? Thank God it's Friday. TGIF. There's actually a restaurant called TGIF. It's a chain. It's a chain in New York City. TGIF. Thank God it's Friday. I love it. I love Fridays. Anyways, have a wonderful day. I'm so happy. Armin, I love you so much. You're the best. I so much enjoy your participation.
Likewise, Anna.
Next week, we're going to have Founders Corner. My amazing Maria is going to start our Founders Corner. It's a must participate. You guys cannot afford not to listen to what we have to say. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Armina will take her part on a nonverbal communication.
Yes, and Armina, yes, because we ran out of time to get, but Armina, please prepare another amazing 10-minute discussion on nonverbal communication. I think it's really, really important. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank
have a
you.
wonderful weekend. And we will see you next Friday. Bye,
you
everyone.
See you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you. Thank you so much. Take
You're
care.
welcome. Thanks for enjoying and participating. Thank you very much, Mohammed.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome.